Welcome to the program. I'm Melissa Walker in Lagos. We begin day 329, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And a helicopter came down today near a nursery in the town of Brovary on the eastern outskirts of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, setting at least one building ablaze. At least 15 people, well, we understand that figure has risen, including Ukraine's interior minister, other senior ministry officials, and 3 children were killed. A photograph obtained by local reports showed the building in flames and smoke billowing. The crash comes in the 11th month of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, still reeling from the deaths of 45 people who were killed in an apartment block in a Russian missile attack on the east central city of Dnipro, Ukraine, on Saturday. Well, Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko has called the helicopter crash a tragedy. Earlier, officials had given an initial death toll of 18. The regional governor said 29 other people were injured, including 15 children. Speaking after an event with Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelenska and other officials, Mr. Klitschko said 16 people were killed in the crash, including 3 children, and nearly 20 others injured in hospitals. He remembered Interior Minister Denis Monastyryski as a very patriotic guy, doing a lot of things for Ukraine.
Tell us about the minister.
He's a young guy, very patriotic guy, doing a lot of things for Ukraine and make a police reform in Ukraine, and it's actually
the vice chair of the
big strategy for Ukraine, for his family, and also children. It's impact of this Russian attack, tragedy today. 16 people in this in helicopter crashes. 16 people died, 3 children, and it's unlucky helicopter fall down in the kindergarten. And right now it's almost 20 people injured in hospitals. And I don't have more information, but I'm not ready to give. We need to investigate what really happens, but right now it doesn't have information.
Elsewhere, Pope Francis condemned the Russian missile strike on January 14 on an apartment building that killed at least 44 people in the east Ukrainian city of Dnipro. He described it as heartbreaking, as he has in nearly all of his public appearances since Russia invaded Ukraine last February. Pope Francis appealed for peace at his weekly general audience in the Vatican. He said, last Saturday, another missile attack caused many civilian victims, among them children. He says he shares in the heartbreaking pain of the family members. He continues, the images and the accounts of this tragic episode are a strong appeal to all people of conscience, and one cannot remain indifferent. Dnipro's mayor, Boris Filatov, said on Tuesday that the death toll had risen to 44. Local officials say about 30 people are still unaccounted for. European Council President Charles Michel today has spoken in favor of the West providing tanks to Ukraine to help it face off against Russia's invasion. The EC president has maintained that the European Union would support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that Moscow had yet to see any serious proposals for peace in Ukraine, and that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's suggestions were absurd. Mr. Lavrov said Moscow stood ready to discuss the conflict with Western countries and to respond to any serious proposals, but that any talks needed to address Russia's wider security concerns. He was speaking at a news conference in Moscow where he called again for NATO to remove its military infrastructure from Ukraine and other countries close to Russia's borders. VOA's Anna Chernikova joins me now from Kyiv with the latest. Hi, Anna, and it appears more bad news in Ukraine. Tell us what the reaction has been in Kyiv following this helicopter crash earlier today.
Good evening. Yeah, it was another tragic day for Ukraine, and to be honest, this helicopter crash hit Ukrainians pretty hard. It was very unexpected, and of course, well, the fact that top interior ministry officials were on board, plus kindergarten was under the most heavy damage because of this crash, and children suffering again, create this really, very difficult mood, really terrible event. And considering that Ukraine is still mourning the tragedy in Dnipro, just a couple of days after the tragedy in Dnipro that we have now, this crash. What we know for the moment, because the numbers were changing quite pretty much, but what we have for this particular moment, and this was confirmed by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, for the moment we know about 17 people killed due to this crash, and this includes one child. So previously there were reports about a couple of children, but for now State Emergency Service confirmed only the death of one, and also 25 people were injured, including 11 children. On board of the helicopter, there were 9 people. All of them died. We already have a list of people who were on board. So there were 6 members of the operative group of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, including the leadership of the ministry, minister himself, his first deputy, State Secretary of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Deputy Head of the Patronage Service of the Ministry, and Head of the Protection Department of the Department of Internal Security of the National Police. Also, there were 3 members of the crew of the State Emergency Service, and helicopter itself was a helicopter of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. We know that this delegation was heading from Kyiv to Kharkiv region, to one of the hotspots in the Kharkiv region, and they were supposed to have number of meetings there today. But unfortunately, at 8:20 in the morning local time, this terrible crash happened. As I already mentioned, the main victim of the crash on the ground was a kindergarten and children that, 8:20 in the morning is exactly the time when parents were bringing children to this facility. So there were really a lot of people outside. And what we hear from the witnesses, because those civilians who are living in this neighborhood, they were the first to rescue children from under the fire in the kindergarten. They were telling that there were a lot of children screaming and civilians basically, and similarly as in Dnipro, civilians were the first to start this rescue operations, and rescue team came, and the rescue operation was done a couple of hours ago. For the moment, again, the Security Service of Ukraine is considering several versions of what had happened. There are 3, particularly the violation of flight rules, technical malfunction of the helicopter, and deliberate actions to destroy the vehicle. But to be honest, Ukrainian society do not really believe in coincidence. Of course, we don't know. For the moment, investigation would show what really had happened. But of course, a lot of people think that this is not a coincidence, and this was somehow a deliberate actions by someone, a certain attack on the heads of Interior Ministry. But again, as I already said, Ukraine is still in mourning for those who died in Dnipro, and this another tragedy really had a really, terrible and difficult hit on Ukrainians.
Indeed. And tell us a bit more about Ukraine's interior minister and, the role that he has had to play in this 11 months of Russia's invasion.
Yeah, so Denis Monastyrsky was a 42 years old minister he had really great reputation in Ukraine. His work within the ministry and reforms that his team was doing were really, really nice, and Ukrainian society were quite happy with what he was doing, and not only the society but also the Ukrainian officials. Really very great reputation, and as we can also see now that a lot of people, even from previous governments, who knew this person, they all mentioned that he was really a very useful person for Ukraine, and especially during this war, he was doing a lot of things. A lot of defense. He had a lot of defense tasks, and his ministry really plays one of the crucial roles within Ukraine, and also his deputy had this team had one of the best reputation among all the interior ministry teams that modern Ukraine ever had. So, he was the one welcoming also Azov leadership when this big swap of prisoners happened. So he was the one in Turkey to welcome them and to basically the first one to meet them. So really, a very sad event really for Ukraine, and a very big loss for Ukraine and for Ukrainian politics, for Ukrainian interior ministry. But again, as ministry mentioned, so condolences are in order, but the ministry is working, continue to work as usual, and a new temporary minister was already appointed, who would take this role until the parliament would vote for the new minister himself.
All right. Anna, of course, Russia has been making statements. Let's look at the latest comments from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who said that no military infrastructure threatening Russia's security should be on Ukrainian soil. He's also saying that the West prohibited Ukraine from holding peace talks with Russia, and that so far Moscow does not see serious Western proposals for peace in Ukraine. What's been Kyiv's response to that?
Well, Ukraine has its own proposal, and President Zelensky has already presented this proposal. Also, his wife, First Lady of Ukraine, Ms. Zelenska, presented this proposal in Davos yesterday during her speech as well. So I don't think it's quite correct from Russian side to say that the West did not propose anything, because the West is not the one to propose. It's war going on between Ukraine and Russia. Of course, the West is supporting Ukraine, and of course, the West and Ukraine has its own negotiations with the West. And what we're hearing from President Biden, particularly, and from also some representatives of the European leadership, that Ukrainian proposals are actually taking quite positively. So basically, there are proposals to discuss, but Russia do not want to discuss these proposals, as we already heard from Russian leadership, that they're not going to even consider this list of this peaceful list that was presented by President Zelensky. So I think that for this particular moment, it's a time again when battlefield decides when Russian side would be ready for any negotiations or any changing in this official public political behavior towards negotiations with Ukraine. And for the moment, what we hear from Russian officials, that the only discussion they accept is discussion of their own terms that they propose. And Ukraine do not accept this term. So for the moment, this is kind of a, blocking situation. And so we will see how things would change. And I guess, at least, and a lot of experts also have similar opinion, that battlefield would pretty much decide when negotiations would be, when it would be a moment when negotiations could start.
And finally, before we let you go, what's happening in Soledar now, the salt mine city?
Yes, according to the reports, almost the whole city is under Russian control at this moment. Ukrainian forces still fighting on the outskirts of the city. And according to the latest reports that we see, this main road, which is basically the main reason why both Russian forces and Ukrainian forces want to control Soledar that much, is because of this main road. It's the main arteria for supplies to Bakhmut. And this road, for the moment, is still not under complete Russian control. So Ukrainian forces still fight on the outskirts of the city, meaning that the road is also still not under Russian control. But again, as I already said, almost the whole city is, so Russian forces control almost the whole city. It's not, as Ukrainian officials mentioned, it's not a complete tragedy for Ukraine. The most important here, and also according to the Institute for the Study of Wars, this is something that, of course, creates great advantage, but it's not, that crucial. What's important that the supply chain is available for Ukrainians or for Russian forces, depending on who controls this main supply chain, the main road. So, and again, control of Soledar would not create, would not give Russia that desirable opportunity to actually control Bakhmut as easy as they wanted. And this is also according to military experts and according to the Institute for the Study of War. So I guess we will be witnessing some, more fightings and more battles around Bakhmut, because still Bakhmut remains one of the main targets for Russian forces. And as we hear from the reports that President Putin had another order for the new now head of this operation, as they call it, as a special operation that Russia calls it, this war, that he wants the whole Donetsk region to be occupied by a certain point in March. So it looks like that Russian forces would try to escalate as much as they can. And Ukrainian forces kind of getting ready for this and getting ready for defense. And also we're hearing some positive news about new supplies, particularly tanks and armored vehicles. So I think that next couple of months, and this is also according to a lot of military experts, both Ukrainian and international, next couple of months would be really crucial in this war and might even be decisive.
VOA's Anna Chernikova from Kyiv. Thank you for joining me and continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
Well, founder of Russian Wagner military company Evgeny Prigozhin has brought a group of ex-fighters who completed in Ukraine to the Republic of Karelia in Russia's northwest. His Concord press service had reported that Prigozhin recruited convicts in Russian prisons to fight in Ukraine, alongside the armed forces, remaining semi-autonomous in their actions. He is said to be at odds with the Russian top military brass. While addressing ex-fighters, he said he needed their criminal talents to kill the enemy at war. Now these talents are no more in demand. He added that those who wish to join Wagner Group again are welcome, but those who want to get married or study are free to do so. Tension between Prigozhin and the government burst into the open last Friday when the Defense Ministry claimed the capture of the Ukrainian town of Soledar, but made no mention of the role of Wagner, a contract militia that operates outside the army chain of command, and had already posted a picture of Prigozhin and his fighters in Soledar's salt mine. Well, let's head to Russia right now. And this is President Vladimir Putin. He's laid flowers at a Second World War memorial in St. Petersburg to mark the 80th anniversary of Soviet forces breaking through the Nazi siege of Leningrad. The Russian leader also took part in a wreath-laying ceremony to mark the pivotal moment in 1943 when the blockade of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, was broken through after Soviet forces opened a narrow land corridor to the city. Lithuania's foreign minister is confident that main battle tanks would be delivered to Ukraine after talking with other leaders at the World Economic Forum, but said the West still needed to do more to ensure Kyiv won the war. Gabrielius Landesbergis told local reporters in an interview on the sidelines of the forum, adding that after Britain announced it would send Challenger tanks, there was less argument for others not to. Western allies will be gathering on Friday at a US airbase in Germany to pledge more weapons for Ukraine. Attention is focused in particular on Germany, which has veto power over any decision to send its Leopard tanks, which are fielded by armies across Europe and widely seen as the most suitable for Ukraine.
Yes, I'm confident because that this is what I'm hearing here as well. Talking with other leaders, definitely there is a momentum. Unfortunately, that the momentum has formed after we've seen again horrendous civilian deaths, destroyed apartment block in Dnipro, and as in cases before, this is what pushes us forward. And also have to add here is that after the announcement of British government that they are going to send their main battle tanks, there's less argument for others not to do the same. I think that if we are serious about Ukraine winning, at the end, not sure what that end will be, but we will be sending many more types of weaponry that we're doing now. And why I'm saying unfortunately is that basically we could do it right now, but we will be waiting for some other imaginary red lines to be crossed, because this is the modus operandi that our allies are choosing. And I usually advocate for it to be done now because it's very sad to see that in order to convince allies to send additional weaponry, civilian deaths are needed. So Ukraine is definitely paying the highest imaginable price for their victory and for their independence.